Hello, hello, hello. This is TPP. How we doing this evening? You guys see the moniker. Welcome to the channel. For my old people and for the new people who tune in to see about all things that are politics, the petty politics, of course. You see the moniker with the MAGA off the rails and MAGA imploding or the Republicans imploding. Trump problem is not his policies. The problem is Trump himself. So tonight I want to talk about something that happened during the Donald Trump's interview with Kristen Welker, because I think it tells us something much bigger than a television interview, right? The exchange itself was only a few moments long, and Kristen Welker asked questions. Donald Trump became irritated and accused everybody of being crooked. Then eventually he reached the point that he always reaches when somebody challenges him. He wanted to end the conversation. Like this.
Tremendous evidence. There's nothing but evidence. The election was rigged. It was a dirty election. And it's happening again right now in California. It's happening right now in California. Right now, it's look at what's happening in California. It's 4 days.
Are doing well in
California. It's no, they're not. They're dropping fast because it's a rigged election. Let me tell you, it's 4 days, and they aren't even close to coming up with it. You know why they're doing that? Because they're cheating on the election.
Do you have evidence to support
all I have to do is look. All I have to do is look.
That's not evidence.
And I listen. And I listen to people, and let's see what happens.
But sir, that's not evidence.
Do you think it's appropriate?
That's how they count the votes.
Do you think it's appropriate that they have an election and 5 days later they're nowhere close to picking a winner?
State and local officials acknowledge they are slow. They're urging.
No, they're crooked.
They're urging the votes to be counted quickly. That's how they vote in California.
They're crooked, just like you're crooked. Your press is crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked.
To be fair, I'm not crooked, but let's
really.
Let's
well,
continue.
You play right into their hands.
Let's continue.
You're either crooked or you're stupid.
You're either crooked or you're stupid. Now think about this for a second. This is the president of the United States. This is not some random dude arguing with people on Facebook or TikTok or whatever. This is not somebody yelling at a family barbecue. This is the person sitting in the most powerful office on earth, and he doesn't know how to control himself. And yet every single time he encounters criticism, accountability, disagreement, facts he doesn't like, or questions he don't care to answer, the response is always the same. This is a female reporter, a black female reporter. The problem is never him. The problem is always everybody else. Everybody else is crooked, never him, which is wild, which is way wild to me. And at some point you have to stop and ask yourself a simple question. If literally everybody around you is the problem, maybe the problem isn't everybody that's around you. Maybe the problem is you, because accountability requires something very simple. It requires the ability to say, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And that is something Donald Trump appears completely incapable of doing, specifically to his MAGA base, specifically to the American people, specifically to anyone. What amazes me is that the Republicans spent decades building an entire political identity around personal responsibility, personal accountability. Remember that? Remember personal accountability, personal responsibility. Actions have consequences. Own your mistakes. Put yourself up. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That was the message until Donald Trump came along. Now suddenly accountability becomes optional, becomes acceptable, excuses all the time. Now suddenly every failure belongs to somebody else. And that contradiction is impossible to ignore now. Now we see the tatters in the clothing. Now suddenly every failure belongs to someone else. Biden did it, and that contradiction is impossible for us to get past. Because if your child behaved in school in this way, you'd correct them. If your employee behaved this way at work, you would discipline them. If your neighbor behaved this way every day, you'd avoid that neighbor every day. But when Donald Trump does it, millions of people pretend like it's normal. Millions of Republicans pretend like this shit is normal. The second that jumped out to me was the reaction itself. That disagreement, frustration, anger, the fragility. There is a difference. Strong leaders answer difficult questions. Weak leaders attack the person asking those questions. Strong leaders defend their decisions. Weak leaders attack the process. This is what Donald Trump continues to do. And that distinction matters because leadership is tested when things become uncomfortable. Anybody can look confident when everybody is cheering you on. Anybody can look strong when everybody agrees to that. The real test is what happens when somebody says something that you don't want to hear, something that Donald Trump don't want to hear. That is where the character shows up. Now let's talk about something else, the media. Because Donald Trump has spent years attacking journalists. Why? Because journalists create records. Videos create records, transcripts, facts. All of these things create records, cold hard records. And records make it harder to rewrite history. That is why politicians hate videotape and footage. Footage don't forget what you said 5 years ago. You can claim you never said it. Then somebody has to, that's all they got to do is roll a tape. Donald Trump said he was going to do X, Y, and Z. You can claim you never promised everybody nothing. You claim that you didn't promise MAGA or the American people or nobody. You claim that you didn't promise them no things like that. No more wars. You said no more wars. You said no more X, Y, and Z. And here we are in the middle of all of this stuff that you said you weren't going to do. You claim you never supported something. Then somebody rolls the tape. The tape is undefeated. Donald Trump knows that. And when Wexler, I keep messing her name up. Wexler, when she challenges him, he starts to berate her. What fascinates me is many of the same people who complain about media bias also spend a lot of time avoiding the media that challenges their belief system. Think about that. If your ideas are so goddamn strong, if Donald Trump's ideas and his policies and all that shit is so good, why are these questions that they're asking so dangerous to you? If your arguments are so strong, why are journalists the enemy? If your policies are so successful, why is criticism such a threat to you? The answer is obvious, because criticism exposes the weaknesses of all that you believe. And weakness is the one thing this political movement, Donald Trump's movement, the MAGA movement, cannot admit exists. Now let's zoom out. This really isn't about that reporter. It really isn't about this one interview. It really isn't about one bad day. This is a pattern that has existed for this Trump administration for years. Every controversy, scandal, investigation, indictment, court case, disagreement somehow always leads back to the same fucking conclusion. Everybody else is wrong. Everybody else is wrong. Everybody else is corrupt. Donald Trump is right. Donald Trump is innocent. Everybody else is lying. Donald Trump is the only person telling the truth. That level of certainty should make a lot of y'all nervous, because democracy requires disagreement. Democracy requires criticism and accountability. No politician on this planet should ever be beyond questioning. Never. Let's roll the tape.
You play right into their hands with this rap. You know that these elections are rigged. Your network knows that they're rigged. You know that I won an election in a landslide, and I got 94% bad press.
But Mr. President,
you know why I got that? Because you have no credibility.
But you've never presented evidence that it was rigged. Let's keep talking about. I want to talk about Todd.
You have more evidence. There's more evidence than ever presented.
Let's talk about
your elections in this country. We're like a third world country. Your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC and CBS and CNN.
But Mr. President,
you're one-sided crooked networks. Right, let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Mr. President, let's please. I traveled all the way to Wisconsin.
I've sat in the rain with you.
I know.
I've sat in the rain with you for an hour, on and off in the rain, and I've given you enough time. You ought to straighten out your press because you know what? A country can never be great with a dishonest press.
Listen, we traveled all the way to Wisconsin.
And here is where I think a lot of Americans are exhausted. Not because politics exists, not because disagreements exist, but because reality itself has become negotiable. We can watch the same video. A lot of us can watch the same video, read the same transcript, hear the same words, and somehow reach completely different conclusions. That is dangerous. Because facts have to matter. Evidence has to matter. Reality has to matter. Otherwise, politics becomes religion. And politicians become prophets. And that is exactly where democracies begin to tumble and get into trouble. The bigger question is not whether Donald Trump got irritated. The bigger question is why millions of Americans continue to view this behavior from him like they would never tolerate that behavior from somebody else. That's the real story. This is the story behind every interview, every controversy, every headline, the double standard. Because if any Democratic president behaved this way, the same people defending Trump would be demanding resignation, impeachment, investigation, hearings, and accountability. And everybody knows that. At the end of the day, this country has survived wars, depressions, corruption, political scandals, all that. What worries me most is not one politician. What worries me is that when millions of people decide that standards only apply to their people, their oppositions, their opponents, because the moment standards become only for the other side, accountability dies. And when accountability dies, power fills that vacuum. That's why these moments matter, that the president is conducting himself this way. Not because Donald Trump got angry, not because he argued with a journalist, but because every one of these moments reveals something deeper about that person. It reveals who he is. And more importantly, it reveals what millions of Americans are willing to accept from somebody they support. And that should concern every damn person in this country, every patriot in this country, regardless of your party. Because presidents come and go, God damn it, they come and go. Politicians come and go. Political parties rise and fall. But the standards we set for leadership and our president determine what kind of country we leave behind and we live in. And speaking of accountability, let's move from Donald Trump to somebody else inside the MAGA movement who got a very uncomfortable reminder this week that questions don't only flow in one direction. Because while Donald Trump was busy getting irritated with Welker for asking questions he didn't like, Erica Kirk was learning what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that same kind of scrutiny that Republicans have spent years demanding from everybody else. The difference is that when Republicans are asking the questions, they call it truth-seeking. When the Republicans are answering the questions, suddenly everybody wants to talk about respect and decorum and moving on and forgetting about that. That brings us to Miss Erica Kirk. We're going to roll the tape, baby. Roll the tape on her.
And I've given you enough time. You ought to straighten out your press because you know what? A country can never be great with a dishonest press.
We traveled all the way to Wisconsin.
It's important to remember that happiness comes and goes, and I pray that you find it.
That's wild. I want That's wild. Because what happened at her event exposed something much bigger than that one protester. And I have been thinking about this. It's bigger than one speech, one protester, one awkward moment on that stage. I think it exposed the growing problem inside the Republican Party, inside the MAGA movement, and specifically among people like Erica Kirk who want the influence that comes with political leadership, but seems far less interested in the accountability that also comes with it. I watched that clip, and what caught my attention was not the protester. Protesters show up at political events every single day. That's politics. What caught my attention was how quickly Erica Kirk wanted to move away from that subject. The moment Jeffrey Epstein, accountability, and powerful people being protected enters the conversation, Erica Kirk immediately pivots. She wanted to talk about faith. She wanted to talk about enemies. She wanted to talk about persecution. She wanted to talk about everything except the question that had just been asked. And that matters because Erica Kirk is not just some random person. Erica Kirk has become one of the public faces of the political movement that spent years demanding answers from everybody else. That is where my frustration begins with her. She is also a person who has allegedly had similar accusations of abuse hurled her way when she ran a business or an orphanage, I can't remember which, with young girls in Romania who ended up disappearing from that country under her watch. And she ended up getting kicked out of that country because of it. I also remember Charlie Kirk and his rhetoric. I remember Turning Point USA and their rhetoric. I remember Donald Trump and his rhetoric. I remember years of speeches about corruption, elites, accountability, powerful people escaping consequences. I remember Republicans telling Americans that nobody should be above scrutiny. I remember Republicans demanding investigations. I remember Republicans demanding transparency. I remember Republicans demanding answers. Why is it that Erica Kirk can't be held accountable to the same standard? Those were not Democratic talking points, all of these accountability factors. Those were Republican talking points, MAGA talking points, Charlie Kirk talking points. So now that voters are asking questions that Republicans find uncomfortable, why does Erica Kirk suddenly act like the question itself about Epstein is inappropriate? That is a part that makes no sense to me. If somebody stood up at one of my events and accused me of protecting pedophiles and predators connected to this pedophile or predator, that would become the entire fucking conversation as far as I'm concerned. I would not move on just like that. I would not make that sour face that she made just like that. I would not pretend the question did not exist. I would not start talking about unrelated topics. I would address it directly because protecting children is one of the most serious issues imaginable. It's not a Democratic issue, not a Republican issue. It's not a liberal issue. It's not a conservative issue. It's a basic human issue. So when Erica Kirk immediately moves away from the questioning instead of confronting it head on, people notice that. I noticed that, and they should. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you address it? What makes this even more interesting is that Erica Kirk wants to be viewed as a leader. She wants to be viewed as somebody whose voice matters inside the Republican Party. Fine. That comes with responsibility, girlfriend. Leadership is not standing on a stage in front of people who already agree with you. Leadership is not reading prepared remarks to a friendly audience. Leadership is not collecting applause from people who came there specifically to support you. Leadership is what happens when somebody challenges you. Leadership is what happens when somebody asks a question you don't want to answer, and you can figure out how to answer it collectively, intelligently. Leadership is what happens when the conversation becomes uncomfortable for you. That is when voters find out who you really are. I don't know what's wrong with that woman. I don't know what's wrong with her. But she's not ready for the spotlight. She's not ready for prime time. I do know that. This is when voters are going to find out what and who she is. And I think what Americans saw in that moment with her was somebody who wanted to escape the conversation rather than engage in it. Hold on, we're gonna back it up just a little bit more. We're gonna show you again.
It's important to remember that happiness comes and goes, and I pray that you find it.
Ain't no way I'm gonna let them do that to me. Ain't no way I'm gonna let them do that to me. Ain't no way. Ain't no way. So let's talk about something else that was bothering me with Erica Kirk, and many of the people around her keep presenting themselves as moral leaders, right? They present themselves as defenders of the faith, defenders of family, traditional values, defender of children, American culture. Those are huge fucking claims. Those are not small tales. If you're going to put yourself on a pedestal, then people are going to hold you to a high standard, girlfriend. The problem is that too often Republicans seem to want the praise that comes with those claims without accepting the scrutiny that comes with those claims. That's what this moment exposed to me anyway. It exposed that to me. Okay. Hey, everybody. Okay. That is what this moment exposed. Because if protecting kids is really the priority, then difficult questions should not make you uncomfortable about Epstein. And you need to answer those questions because you were kicked out of a country because girls under your watch, girls under Erica Kirk's watch were disappearing in this foreign country. Allegedly. But it ain't really no allegedly, but I'm going to say allegedly just in case. Young girls under a orphanage or a house or a hostel or whatever that she was running, girls were disappearing. Young girls were disappearing under her watch. And these questions are going to be even more difficult for her to answer. If accountability is really the priority, then difficult questions should not make her uncomfortable at all. If exposing corruption is really the priority, then difficult questions should not make anybody in your organization uncomfortable for answering. Instead, what we keep seeing from the Republicans is a pattern where accountability is demanded from Democrats, but viewed as an attack when it's directed for Republicans. American people are not blind. They see it. They see Donald Trump demanding standards from everybody else that he refuses to apply to himself. They see Republican media demanding answers from Democrats while avoiding difficult conversations involving Republicans. They see Republican influencers who built careers talking about corruption suddenly becoming remarkably quiet when uncomfortable questions get close to home. And that brings me back to Erica Kirk. Because what really frustrated me about her response was how dismissive it felt. Oh, and let me just say this to you. Oh, you just shut you up. Let me pull out the religion card. Let me pull that religion card out, and then I just talk to you like that. Okay? The way she spoke to that person was very dismissive. And it was inside of her house. It was inside of her TP USA program. It was another Republican who said that to her. Wasn't no Democrat in that crowd. There was a Republican who asked her or said to her, why is she covering up for pedophiles? There was a Republican who asked her that question. Okay. She was very dismissive with that person. The implication seemed to be that the person asking the question was a problem. The interruption was a problem. The criticism was a problem. Not Erica, not the people she hang around, not the things she do, not the things she says. The question is the point. The question is exactly what public figures are supposed to deal with. You do not get to step into politics and then act offended when politics happen with you. That is not how that works. Okay. What is especially frustrating is that Charlie Kirk built his entire public image around confrontation. Charlie Kirk made a career out of walking on the college campuses and challenging people. Okay. Republicans celebrated that approach for years and years. They called it courage. They called it truth telling. They called it fearless. But now that the questions are being directed at Republicans specifically, suddenly everybody wants decorum. Suddenly everybody wants to respect. Suddenly everybody wants people to stop asking uncomfortable questions. And again, America notices that. Everybody notices that now. They notice the double standard. They notice the double standard is becoming impossible to defend. The larger problem is that Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party in a way that rewards loyalty over consistency and accountability. The Republican Party used to talk endlessly about character. It used to talk endlessly about personal responsibility. It used to talk about accountability, responsibility. Today, those things are secondary to them. Today, loyalty is the highest value. If somebody is loyal to Donald Trump, Republicans will tolerate any kind of behavior. Look at who they nominated in Texas. Ken Paxton. Trash if I ever saw a trash person. Trash if I ever saw a trash politician. If somebody supports the team, the rules become flexible if you're a Republican. If somebody opposes the team, the rules become absolute if you're a Republican. That is not principle, that's tribalism. And it's destroying our public trust. And it's destroying our government. At the end of the day, this story is not really about a protester who hollered at Erica Kirk or called out Erica Kirk. It's not really about one event. It's not really about the awkward moment. It is about Erica Kirk finding herself confronted with the very thing Republicans have demanded from everybody else over the years: scrutiny. Republicans demand scrutiny. Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump, Turning Point, they all demand scrutiny. Conservative media demanded scrutiny. Well, scrutiny has arrived, honey. And now the question is whether Erica Kirk and the Republican Party actually believe in the standards they spent years preaching about. Because if accountability matters, it has to matter when Republicans are involved too. If transparency matters, it has to matter when Republicans are involved too. If protecting children matters, it has to matter when Republicans are involved too. And if nobody is above scrutiny, then Erica Kirk, Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, all of them, every other public figure in the Republican movement need to get comfortable answering difficult questions instead of running from them. Donald Trump ran like he ran for the hills. Erica Kirk just pretended like the question wasn't even asked, like pretending like it wasn't even said. That is the conversation Erica Kirk should have had. The accountability question. That's the conversation Republicans keep trying to avoid. And the longer they avoid it, the more people are going to keep asking. Now, you might wonder what Erica Kirk getting heckled has to do with the next subject, the Mormon voters being furious at the federal government. On the surface, absolutely nothing, but politically, they're exactly the same story. Both stories involve people who thought they were securely inside the Republican tent and suddenly discovering that their concerns are not being treated as priority. Erica Kirk learned that MAGA activists are willing to challenge their own leaders. Mormon voters may be learning that being a loyal Republican voting bloc does not necessarily mean Republican leadership is going to rush to defend them. And that brings us to what might be the most fascinating story of the day, that the Mormons are no longer considered Christians by the Trump administration. Woo. I have to tell you, though, if I were a Mormon voter who spent years supporting the Republican Party, I would be absolutely furious right now. Because according to reports, the federal government has changed how it classifies members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, separating them from the broader Christian designation. Let's play the tape. Hold on. Uno momento, y'all. Here we go.
Storm has erupted this afternoon between Mormons, specifically a firestorm has erupted this afternoon between Mormons, specifically Mormon Republicans, and Pete Hegseth. So as you know, Pete Hegseth and the Pentagon have now cut the amount of recognized religions from over 150 to just this list of 31 religions. And the goal of it is to promote Christian nationalism. Now, there are 21 denominations of Christianity listed under religious faith, this new list. Mormons are furious. Why? Because Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not listed as a Christian denomination. Here is Republican Senator Mike Lee from Utah saying, quote, "Can anyone tell me why the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was left out of the list of Christian churches? By omitting Christian next to the phrase Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Pete Hegseth has maybe intentionally or unintentionally caused a major firestorm that's a big headache right now for the President of the United States. Let me know what you think. Spread the word."
Okay. So they took the the Latter-day Saints off the list of Christian religions. Whether you agree with that decision or not is almost besides the point. The issue is that millions of Mormon Americans believe they are Christian and identify as Christian, worship Jesus Christ, and have spent decades being part of the Republican coalition. Now they're watching the federal government effectively tell them you are something else and not Christian. And where's Donald Trump? Where are the Republican leaders? Where is all the outrage? Because I thought Republicans were trying to defend Christians. I thought Republicans were the party defending religious liberty. I thought Republicans were the party standing up for the people of faith when government agencies got involved in religious matters. Apparently, there are exceptions. Let's be honest about what makes this story so fascinating to me, though. Mormons have been one of the most reliable Republican voting groups in the country for decades. Utah is one of the safest Republican states in America. Mormon voters have donated money, knocked on doors, volunteered, voted overwhelmingly for Republican candidates. They have been loyal members of the coalition. So I'm trying to figure out how, sitting here, I have to ask this very simple question. Why is the Trump administration allowing the federal government to redefine faith? Because that is how many Mormons see this. They don't see a bureaucratic classification change. They see the government saying that they're not Christian. And if that is how they interpret it, then why aren't Republicans fighting like tooth and nail to get it reclassified? We all know what would happen if a federal agency changed the classification involving evangelical Christians, right? Conservative media would be running 24/7 news coverage. Republican members of Congress would be demanding hearings. Donald Trump will probably be posting about it before breakfast on that shitty social. But Mormons, apparently, they're supposed to be quiet about it and accept it. And that is where I think Mormon voters may be getting a lesson in political reality. Every political coalition has groups that are essential during elections and less important afterward. Every political coalition has groups whose concerns are of immediate import, okay? Beyond national emergencies, it is what it is. This story is forcing Mormon voters to ask whether they fall into the secure category of Christians or not. This story is forcing Mormons to ask, are we still Christian to the Trump administration? But the silence is deafening for any other group, for the other groups. If the federal government is effectively telling millions of Mormons that they no longer belong under a Christian classification, why isn't this dominating Republican media? Why ain't Donald Trump talking about it? Why ain't Fox News talking about it every night? Why aren't the Republican leaders demanding immediate action? Those are fair questions. And I think many Mormon voters are beginning to ask these questions. Now, look, there's certain Christians who have never considered Mormonism part of traditional Christianity. That theological debate has existed for generations. Baptists argue it, evangelicals argue it, Catholics argue it. The debate is older than Donald Trump and older than most of us, okay? But here's the difference. That debate used to happen in churches. That debate used to happen among theologians. That debate used to happen in religious circles. Now the federal government is stepping into the middle of it. That changes everything. Because once the government starts making classifications that millions of believers interpret as statements about their faith, it stops being a theological discussion. It becomes a political issue. And Republicans have spent decades telling us they oppose government involvement in religious matters. So where are they now? That's what I want to know. Because if Donald Trump and Republicans truly believe government should stay out of religion, then this should bother them a whole bunch. If Republicans truly believe government should not be deciding religious questions, then this should bother them too. Yet the reaction has been remarkably muffled. And I think Mormon voters are noticing this. The uncomfortable truth may be that Mormon voters are discovering they're not as important to today's Republican Party as they once were. The center of gravity in the Republican Party today is Donald Trump. That center of gravity is MAGA. That center of gravity is the evangelical movement, not the Mormon movement. And if those groups are not demanding action, Republican leadership may not feel much pressure to act or change this classification. That has to be frustrating because this isn't just about a classification code. It's about the respect. It's about religion. This is about whether Republican leaders are willing to defend Mormon voters with the same energy they defend other parts of their coalition. Right now, many Mormon voters may feel like they already have their answer. And if I were sitting in Utah watching the federal government tell me I wasn't a Christian, while Republican leaders sat quietly on the sidelines, I'd have some serious questions about who exactly this administration considers important enough to fight for. So when you step back and look at all three of these stories, you start to see why I call this episode MAGA's in Trouble or MAGA off the rails. Donald Trump spent another week showing Americans that criticism is something he takes personally instead of something leaders are supposed to handle when it comes their way. Erica Kirk found out that when you build a movement around asking uncomfortable questions, eventually those uncomfortable questions get asked of you. And Mormon voters may be discovering that decades of loyalty to the Republican Party does not automatically guarantee that Republican leaders will fight for issues that y'all care about. Now, are any of these stories individually catastrophic? Probably not. Not for the Republican Party. But politics is rarely about one moment. Politics is about the patterns. And the patterns I see coming from the Republican coalition is that it's becoming harder and harder to hold them together. You have Trump demanding loyalty. You have activists demanding accountability. You have religious groups wondering whether they still matter. You have different factions of the Republican Party pulling in different directions. While Republican leadership pretends everything is fine. Maybe it is fine. Maybe these are just temporary disagreements. But when your leader's fighting with the press, your influencers are getting challenged by their own supporters, Erica Kirk, that must have been the most embarrassing thing ever when that damn supporter came out and asked Erica Kirk, why are you supporting pedophiles? One of the most reliable voting blocs, the Mormons, are feeling ignored by the administration they helped to elect. Those are not signs of a movement that are getting stronger. That's signs of a movement getting weaker and weaker. Those are signs of a movement asking questions about itself. And that is why these stories matter. Not because Donald Trump gets angry, not because Erica Kirk gets heckled, not because Mormons are upset that somebody took them off a Catholic classification list. These stories matter because all three point to the same question. Who actually matters inside today's Republican Party? Who gets heard? Who gets defended? And who gets told to sit down, shut up, and be quiet? The answers to those questions are going to shape the future of the Republican Party far more than any Democrat ever could. Because political movements usually don't fall apart from attacks on the outside. They fall apart when the people on the inside start questioning whether they're being treated fairly. And that's exactly what makes these stories worth paying attention to. This is why we continue to say that the Republican Party is falling apart. It's like there's no loyalty to each other in this movement. Okay. So let me check out one or two questions. Somebody said something about the question. Strongly will tell you to shut the hell up. Okay, you're supposed to have trust in. Well, nobody has trust in this leadership, Black America. Nobody has trust in the leadership. 76% don't have trust in this leadership. Okay. The left was never supposed to run things. You sound goofy, Big Bear. What haven't been hated. Sorry, Dim said that. Yeah, we sure did, Big Bear. We sure did. Now the bar's in hell, and look who we got. Okay. Look at the bar's in hell. Look what we got. I can hear nothing. The person was saying, okay, y'all not buying. Why are you still following all these white? I follow black and white people. That don't even make sense, Black America. Okay, what does have to do with Epstein? She got called out in a one of her TPA USA forums, and somebody asked her why was she protecting pedophiles. That's what happened to her. Somebody asked her why was she protecting pedophiles. She already got kicked out of a country on her own when she was running an orphanage in Romania, Albania. She was running an orphanage there, and girls started disappearing from the orphanage. Little girls started disappearing from the orphanage that she was running. like being kidnapped or whatever they were being, and she got kicked out of the country. This is Erica Kirk. Okay. This is what happened. This is why it matters. This is why her getting asked about Epstein kind of matters, because Epstein kidnapped and trafficked girls. She was accused of kidnapping and trafficking girls in other countries. Maybe she wasn't accused of it. The people that she was supposed to be watching over got accused of it. Okay. So it is what it is. And that's what happened. And the Republican Party is being hypocritical and don't want to take accountability for anything that is going down their way, including the fact that they took the Mormons off the Christianity list. So they're mad about that. This is wild. Chris, they're going to respond to a question. I don't know what question you want me to respond to. Let me get this one question from Chris 601. Okay, Republicans in America. Let me read. Why are you spreading propaganda? That don't even make sense. It's not propaganda. It's fact. You sound dumb. Okay. What is your want to restrict? You sound dumb. Just because you don't like what I'm saying doesn't mean I'm not telling the truth. I swear, some of y'all are so emotional. You never want to read. You never want to get any kind of critical thinking into whatever you're thinking. You don't want to read opposition research. You just want to hear what you want to hear. And that doesn't America no good. Why do you think we're having a problem with our country now? Because most of y'all, if you're a MAGA person, you don't want to hear you reluctantly want to hear truth. You reluctantly don't want to hear some of this stuff. Accountability. It's always about somebody else. It's never about your president. It's never about the Republican Party. It's never the fact that they've run this country into the ground, as far as I can see. So it is what it is. So if you like my content, you like my commentary, please hit the like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate it. I have content like this Monday through Thursday, every night at 10 p.m. Sure. Like I said, Chris 601, you got to get out more. You got to get into other conversations, because if you're saying I'm spreading false propaganda, I don't know what to say. It's just my commentary. It's not propaganda. Everything that I told you is fact. You can look it up. But then again, you don't want to look up facts. You just want to hear what you want to hear. So if you like my content, please put a like, share, and subscribe in the comment section, and like the video. And I will be back tomorrow with another video. And I appreciate all of you guys showing up. Chris 601, please do some critical thinking. Please do some more reading. Please go to other channels other than the ones you like. That's wild. Yes. Please go to other channels that you don't like and maybe hear some truth. It just is what it is. And I'll see you guys in the next one. I appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.